guys. Right, so this morning on Facebook Live, I promised you a little tutorial on how to use your sewing machine to sew on buttons. Now, if you've got a modern machine and it comes with one of these feet, you're fine. You don't need this tutorial. What you need is your book, your manual, or to go online and look how to attach a button using this little foot. Okay, so that's not what this one is for. This one is to teach you how to use a machine that doesn't come with that. So what you need is a machine that actually you can take the foot off, but the shaft stays behind. So I was going to show you on my Bernina, but the Bernina, the entire foot with the shaft comes off, so it doesn't work on that. So I'll do a different tutorial on that one for the older Berninas. So there's a few modifications you will have to make, depending on two things. Does your machine allow you to drop the feed dogs? The feed dogs are these metal teeth here, and that's what does this as you're sewing, and it drags the fabric through. So if you don't have that, then you need a piece of cardboard or a little stack of post-it notes, something to cover up the feed dogs over here, right? So that's the difference. If you can drop your feed dogs, you don't need the cardboard modification. So what I've done is I've just made a little cutout, and that's going to go over where the needle goes into the sewing machine. So if I take the foot off this machine, right, foot's off, I'm now left with the arm, I don't know what you call it. Anyway, there it is. And that's what you want. So you lift that up, and I'm going to pretend my machine doesn't have a drop the feed dog mechanism. It actually does, but I'm going to show you this technique. So we take our little piece of cardboard. The cutout needs to go over where the needle goes. Okay, so I'm going to place that over where the needle goes down into the sewing machine, into the body, and I'm going to just put some temporary tape in place just to stop it from moving around. Hopefully it's big enough for you to actually make this work. If it's too thin, the teeth might just tear the fabric, the paper. So maybe use a little piece of cardboard or a piece of plastic, something along those lines. So now your machine is more or less here set up. The other thing you now need to do is to set your machine on a zigzag stitch. This is a pretty modern machine, so it's got a computer screen. So I select the zigzag option. You also then, after you've selected zigzag, are going to reduce your stitch length down to 0. So I adjust my stitch length. Yours will be a dial. You want it down to 0 because you don't want it to move your fabric or your button while you're doing this. So I turn it down to 0, and that's the stitch length down to 0. And at the moment, my width of my zigzag is 3.0. And that very much will depend on the distance between the holes on your button. So if the holes on your button are 3 millimeters apart, a 3 stitch width will be adequate. If it's 4 millimeters apart and it's a bigger button, you change the width of your zigzag up to 4 millimeters. Now, handy little trick. Here's my fabric that I'm putting my button onto. Here's my button. And this is marvelous. You take a piece of sellotape or any tape, Christmas tape in this case. You're just putting it over the edge of the button. You don't want to cover the holes, okay? So you're just doing that, and then you stick it into place wherever you are going to want to attach your button. So this is the interesting bit now. Now, on here, you want to place it underneath the foot. It's a bit more difficult on this because I don't have a lever. If you've got a lever, this is a lot easier, but I don't. I've got these buttons that raise the presser foot up and down. So I'm going to gently try and lower the presser foot until it comes into contact with the button, right? So now that's holding the button firmly to the paper. And using your hand wheel, get your foot off the pedal, guys. Use your hand wheel always towards you. You turn it down until it touches the button. You can see immediately I've got it in the wrong place. So I'm going to raise it up and I'm going to move it forward so that the needle goes directly into the hole in the button, and then I can lower my presser foot again. Okay, that's the first thing. Now the next step will be the zig and the zag. One's left and one's right. So I've done the zig. I'm now going to do the zag to the right. I let the machine, my machine has got a fix mode. I should have switched it off, but that's okay. If yours probably doesn't have this, if it doesn't have that. So now the needle has jumped across 3 millimeters to finish the zigzag. And it should, if this is a 3 millimeter gap, go into the hole. Now it does, but I'm not 100% happy with that, because for me, I would like that to go a little bit more to the center of the buttonhole. So I'm going to adjust my width 1/2 millimeter upwards. Your machine may not have this option. It may be purely mechanical. So, but there you go. So I use my hand wheel because you are bound to break a few needles practicing this. So have them ready. And if you're a bit worried, wear some protective glasses as well. So now I can see the zig and the zag are staying in one position. It's not moving my fabric. And I am fairly confident that both the left and the right stroke of my zigzag are going into the center of the buttons. There you go. So that's how you set the machine up. Once you're happy with that, and all your buttons are the same size, if they are, you can then just start to sew. When you've done at least 10 stitches, you can then take your button off, raise your presser foot. If you've got a lever, raise it up. If you don't, just do the manual thing, snip off your threads, and there you have your button attached. Now, anybody who buys ready-to-wear garments off the shelf will know without a doubt that the first thing that falls off a garment is a button. And the reason for that is because they sew buttons on with a machine and they don't always knot them very well. So I like to do one of two things. Pull the thread to the back. If you pull the back one, it'll pull the front one to the back as well. So a terrible color this to work with. But there, you've got 2 threads now. Now you can do a knot in that. That should be sufficient for what you need to attach a button. If, however, you're like me and you just really worry and you just don't like buttons coming off and having to repeat the process, I take a dab of fabric glue and I put it onto the end of the button here. I just onto the stitches, and that will stop the unraveling of your thread. So now you know your machine is set up to do as many buttons as you want. So we'll recap. Stick your button on with a piece of sellotape into the position it needs to go in. Drop your feed dogs, or put your cardboard cutout over the hole. Put your presser foot down, and or put the needle into the left-hand hole. When you're happy with that, put the presser foot down so it's clamping it down. Adjust your machine to a 0 stitch length and to a zigzag stitch the width of the holes, the distance between the 2 holes. Hand crank it for the first few stitches to triple check that it's in the right place, and then do your stitches. When it's done, lift up your foot, pull it off, snip your threads reasonably long, and then pull them back to the back and knot them off. And there you have a machine attached buttonhole. Success. Now you can carry on making hundreds of headbands without getting calluses on your fingers. So I hope you found that useful, and I'll try and do a couple more with a different machine, slightly older machine, so you can see. But if your machine does a zigzag and it's adjustable, you can definitely do this with your buttons. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Happy crafting.